DeGrasse, and I'm joined today by Alex Gellman. He is
Hey,
CEO
Martha.
of Vertical Bridge. Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
Excellent. AGL is glad that you could join us today, and I think we're here to talk about your outlook for the year ahead, which we can't really do without starting a little bit and hearing about lessons learned from the year that we're finishing up right now.
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned. Hopefully, well, I would, a lot of this, so 2020 has been not a great year for certain aspects of the business. Certainly, I would say leasing overall for tower companies in the US has been fairly muted. I think there was a lot of hope expressed by others around a pickup in the second half that really, I don't feel ever materialized. But I do think that, as we look ahead, I think it does inform, to your point, what 2021 looks like. I think that we're going to see a flip-flop, whereas this year was driven by AT&T and Verizon. Next year will be driven by T-Mobile and Dish. The reason why I feel that way is there's significant capital issues and challenges for Verizon and AT&T as we enter the new year. That to me means they'll be very judicious in their spending. One is for AT&T, I think they have this DirecTV business that they, there's lots of talk around how are they going to disposition it. I sort of feel, Martha, that until they do decide what's going to happen with DirecTV, it may hold back big spending on the wireless network. Secondly, for Verizon, the auction's coming. The C-band auction's still, coming like a freight train. It's a very big auction, 10x potentially the CBRS auction earlier this year, and Verizon could be half of that. So a $20 billion spend by Verizon is not, off the radar. That's a whole year of CapEx for them. So logically, I expect that there'll be a heavy participant there. It's very valuable mid-band spectrum that fits with their portfolio. History dictates they'll buy it, they'll plan for it, then they'll roll out the plan. They're a big company. That takes a while. So to me, that pushes them into the latter half of the year in terms of spending uptick. Conversely, T-Mobile's been very quiet this year. The merger closed April 1. They're still quiet. We're all waiting for them to really pick up. They're doing a lot of 2.5 amendments, but not much else. So I think that'll change in the new year. And then the wild card is Dish. Dish is, done a lot behind the scenes, sort of under the water, if you will, under the surface to get ready. But I do think in 2021, we'll see more overt activity, leases signed, et cetera. Throughout the course of the year. So I'd say the outlook to me for next year is about the same as this year, which is not the greatest year that we would hope for, but the beyond that looks good. But I do think the carriers will flip-flop in terms of who's most active.
Okay, great. So let's talk about Dish just a little bit. We saw
Sure.
a tower deal from them this month with Crown, and then a fiber deal just yesterday. Yeah. So you think that that's just the beginning? There's a lot more to come, or is that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would expect them. I mean, I don't know on the fiber side, but I mean, I think there's a lot of signaling that's going on now in who they're announcing first. I think they're going to end up working with everybody because that sort of makes sense. I think it's interesting that the Crown deal was towers, and then there was a fiber deal that was not Crown.
Yeah, and Crown said, oh, they like us because of our fiber. And then like 2 days later, there was a fiber deal. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think there'll be many more. I don't know what'll get announced or not announced. That's really up to Dish. But I'm sure there'll be many, many more agreements. They have a tight timeline, and they're committed to hitting it. And that means they're going to have to do a lot of leases and installations.
They do have a tight timeline, and they also have the commitment to the Open RAN architecture. Does that change anything for you as the tower owner? No,
I think it's a great question, Martha. There's two concepts out there that I think are separate. There's Open RAN and there's shared RAN, and they're not the same. Open RAN means that the equipment that you use, the radios that you put behind the antenna, are not proprietary to any one manufacturer. So if just because you have a core that's from Nokia, you don't necessarily have to buy Nokia radios, and that you don't necessarily, all the components are standalone and interoperable. That means savings, significant savings for Dish, and we're all for that, right? That's good. The saving money. This happened with base stations, and now it's happening with the RAN on the tower. The shared RAN is totally different, which is two or more carriers sharing the radio coverage from antennas and radios on the tower. That's totally different. That doesn't happen here in the U.S.
Right, in other countries. Yeah. Okay, good. And what about locations? Do you see Dish starting more towards the metro areas, or do you think it's for sure? Okay.
For sure. I mean, their goal is pop coverage. So you have to go where the pops are, and you want density. I think it's not just that, because I do believe, Martha, they're building ultimately a competitive network. So, you know, you can't cover, I'm from Philly, so everything goes back to Philly, but you can't cover Philly and get all the pops and be competitive if you don't go to Atlantic City and you don't go to state capital in Harrisburg. So by definition, it's more of a metro concept, but I do think it starts inside out in terms of meeting the coverage objectives.
Okay, good. And Dish obviously has a strong 5G focus, but the other carriers perhaps are still having a ways to go with 4G. Is that correct to you, or do you think it's mostly 5G from here on?
I think everything is called 5G, regardless of what it really is. I think that's because you can't really, for the existing big three carriers, you can't really separate 4G from 5G. The 5G will not be standalone. It will be built and overlaid on top of the 4G networks. And so what we're seeing is the activity that's been going on this year and into next year. A lot of it is densification and improvement of the 4G network. So look at T-Mobile, they're rolling that 2.5 spectrum from Sprint out across their network. That means, you know, better speeds, better service. And then where they add 5G, a lot of that capability will be available on that stronger base. The only standalone 5G is Dish.
Yeah. Okay, I've heard you speak in the past about the importance of fiber in the locations carriers are choosing. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, to quote my longtime friend and partner, Mark Gansey, don't tell him I quoted him. Fiber is the connective tissue of all communications infrastructure. So increasingly what we see is a desire to be where fiber is. And that, to us, will gradually dictate siting more and more and more. You know, you go back even a few years and tower developers would develop a tower for a customer, and you build it, and then they say, I can't get fiber to it. I have a problem using it. So that's completely reversed now. And so what we see is, and with edge compute as well, the locations will be dictated by access to fiber as a primary consideration, just like power, and then go from there. So we really feel that we will more and more partner with fiber companies, including Zayo, but others as well, in locating communications infrastructure along their fiber, where you can access literally what side of the street you're on can make a difference.
Okay, yeah. And a lot of times at the base of the tower, there's not a lot of room. So it's not always practical to be there, right?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I've been in towers a long time, as you know. A lot of urban towers don't have a lot of room. If you go to California, for example, it's not unusual to have pretty small plots in the ground. And I'm looking at these edge data center facilities, and I'm pretty familiar with what everybody's looking at. They don't fit. There's no place to put them. So, and certainly no place to grow from the initial installation if you think the business is really going to take off and grow. So yeah, my view is put it where the fiber is, and then you'll get the connectivity to what you need. The latency loss through fiber is 5 milliseconds per 1,000 kilometers. So you have some flexibility there to move it a little bit.
Okay, follow the fiber. All right, good. Before we finish, can we talk a little bit about M&A activity and your outlook there?
Yeah, been a really busy year for us, surprisingly. You know, we sort of, we build as many towers as we can, Martha, but on M&A, we're opportunistic. Some years we'll buy very little, some years we'll buy a lot. This year happened to be a lot. because we saw some things that we thought were interesting. I think the Insight deal, the acquisition of Insight by American Tower, sort of the headline transaction for the year in the industry in the U.S. That's the number 2 private tower company in the U.S. now owned by American Tower. That has a ripple effect for the customers. They took notice, and obviously, we looked at that and said, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be owned by anybody. We want to stay private, at scale, and permanent. That's our mission. But I think it will, the other headline in M&A, new entrants, new money flowing in, new funds getting involved, new people entering as acquirers. And so prices have just continued to ratchet up. So I would say during COVID, the private market multiples have gone up 5 turns. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing. Well, I guess, do low interest rates impact that as well?
Absolutely. Money is, long-term money is available fairly inexpensively. And I also think that the lenders and just the investors in the space, subordinated investors, recognize the stability and strength of this business model, towers in particular, and will lend more leverage, and the price is low. So yeah, both things contribute to pushing prices up. And that's true across a lot of real estate. But look, I like to say people who do the work to understand the tower model in particular fall in love with it, and then they don't ever fall out of love with it. So just more and more money comes in.
Yeah, good. All right. Anything else that you think is important to note about your outlook for the year ahead?
No, I think that I would say the long-term outlook is really good. I feel very excited that the next 5 years of lease up is probably better than the last 5 years. I don't think 21 is that year. And I feel a little bit like we keep saying that because 20 was supposed to be great and then 21 was supposed to be great. But I think once Verizon and AT&T sort of clear their overhangs and the C-band settles out, they're going to invest in their wireless network because T-Mobile is, and I know they will. And so I feel like that takes a little bit of time. They're big companies, but I think that we will, a year from now, we'll be talking pretty excitedly about what 22 looks like.
Well, let's hope so. Good note to finish on. All right, Alex Gellman, CEO, Vertical Bridge. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Martha. Stay well.